I decided to do my presentation on solving a mystery in the classroom. This can to kind of start. There were a couple of lines I really liked. The first one is a mystery is a hook for learning. Got this from the textbook. But mysteries in classrooms provide an engaging interaction between the students and the material. The reason why using mysteries work is because think about, CSI. People really like solving mysteries. When watching the show, they're like, "Oh, I think it was the neighbor or it was the sister." They like figuring out the whole story. And students are the same. If you give them just little tidbits of information, they'll want to piece it together. But the textbook really recommends not telling your students the whole idea, like the main idea of a topic, just enough information to keep them curious and want to learn more. So, for some examples to kind of clear this up, I'm a biology comp teaching major. So here's some of the examples for a science classroom. There was a quote here in the textbook, every lab tells a story. I really liked that because I think most of the time we think of labs, these really technical things, but sometimes they can be really applicable, like even in our everyday lives. Just like, I don't know, but I really, really liked that. There was one example from the textbook for science. It was showing a lake before and after a drought, and then letting students figure out what happened in between the two pictures just by looking at it and kind of making deductions from the context clues. Here, and then there are two that I came up with. This first one's giving its students examples of evolution. So telling them about an environment and them guessing which kind of animal is going to do best in that environment. There's a pretty famous case, I guess, in ecology of moths, where the dark moths would do really, really great, and then the environment changed, and then the light moths would. Or it's the same thing with mice, depending on where there's desert mice. The really dark desert mice do really great on darker rocks because they're naturally natural selection picked out the dark mice that survived more, versus the lighter mice would do better on the wider rocks. So, and then the second one, I feel like this one's a pretty common one. I did something similar to this when I was in school, but giving students fake pathology cases and they have to figure out the cause of the disease. I did something similar where I had to figure out the cause of food poisoning, like who gave everybody food poisoning at the neighborhood picnic. But yeah, those are some science examples and kind of explaining. Here are examples from the textbook. The first one is a history example. So instead of telling students what ruined the South after the Civil War, tell them that there are two very different opinions on how to fix the South. And this is coming from the textbook. I don't completely understand. Not the greatest at history. But yeah, it said let them work out what the two opinions are and then which makes more sense, what actually happened. So just kind of give them the option to kind of be like, oh, what do you think the South should have done to rebuild after the Civil War? And then tell them what actually happened afterwards. ELA, the textbook really recommended using an inquiry log where students can write down their own questions, then just kind of work through them through their own research. There's a quote here too that students delve much deeper into the book when they were asking questions rather than answering them. And then they had an example. So for teaching Romeo and Juliet, you can ask questions like what is love and when does it become an obsession? The last thing for math, this one would be using word problems and asking students to compare the two, asking them how the information in the problems could be used in a graph or a chart, and then asking them for different ways to solve the problem. So just kind of instead of giving instruction, letting them try to solve the problem by themselves first. It was really cool. I'm gonna put that to the side. The textbook offered books to help engage students in mysteries. The first two are for history. The Dark Game is about American history and like spy stories in American history. And then the second one is Photo by Brady. It's real photos of the Civil War from a famous photographer from the time. We Were Liars by E. Lockhart. Has got an unreliable narrator that'd be really good to kind of like just makes language arts students really think. Mathematical Curiosities that talks about just different tidbits from math and like really interesting stories. Double Helix, I actually really want to read this one. It's about molecular biology and genetics, so it's right up my alley. And then finally, here are some discussion questions that I came up with. So, how does this strategy allow lessons to become more learner led than teacher led? And then, how might students struggle when not given direct instruction in solving the mystery? So, what are the potential downfalls of this strategy? Anyways, thank you.